Dritan Rexhepi is without any doubt the successful model of the Balkan criminals' cocaine emissaries in Latin America. It is believed that Rexhepi arrived in Ecuador in 2011 after he escaped a prison in Belgium.
This is the story of a man who seemed unstoppable. He stood at the helm of one of the biggest drug syndicates of the world, all whilst being locked up. He managed to get 14 notorious Albanian organizations to work as one, and together they would go on to smuggle thousands of kilos of coke throughout the world. Prison escapes, drugs, corruption, hits and money. This story truly has it all. This is the story of Dritan Rexhepi, one of Albania's most notorious drug lords. Dritan Rexhepi was born in 1980 in Albania and ventured into crime at a very young age. In his teenage years, Dritan was already suspected of being a hitman. After the hit on 2 police officers in 1998, Dritan lived a life on the run. At the turn of the century, it is assumed that Dritan got involved in other crimes, such as robberies and drug smuggling. It remained quiet around him as he supposedly started building his criminal network. It wasn't until 2006 that Dritan got arrested in the Albanian port of Durrës for the hit he was suspected of. He was taken to a holding cell where he was interrogated. At one point, the interrogators took a break and Dritan was brought back to his holding cell. However, the cell wasn't properly closed. Dritan was able to walk out and told the officer on guard, "They're done with me, I'm free to go." It was later suspected that the officer on guard was in cahoots with Dritan, though it was never fully confirmed. Either way, it was Dritan's first escape, and definitely not his last. After his escape, he moved to the Netherlands, where he resumed being involved in crime. However, in 2008, he got arrested once again. This time, he was extradited to Italy, where they wanted to sentence him to jail for coke trafficking. You might feel it coming already. He escaped from the prison of Voghera he was being held at. In 2011, he was arrested once again, this time by the Spanish authorities. They extradited him to Belgium because he also had to serve time there for armed robberies. He was put in the Merksplas jail, an outdated jail where no serious or flight-prone criminals were incarcerated. A big mistake, because Dritan was both a serious and flight-prone criminal. So, you've guessed it, he escaped fairly easy once again. This time, he was put on the Interpol Red Notice list. After this escape, he was gone off the radar again. This time, it was for a few years. In those few years, Dritan did not sit still. He situated himself in Ecuador, from where he would go on to fortify bonds in Ecuador itself, as well as Colombia, Bolivia, and Peru. Ecuador is not a country known for the production of coke. However, it is the world's largest exporter of bananas, shipping about 6.5 million metric tons a year by sea. Being wedged between the world's largest cocaine producers, Colombia, Bolivia, and Peru, it's a perfect hub for drug traffickers to utilize containers filled with bananas to smuggle their product. Bananas are perishable goods, thus it's of high importance to export them as fast as possible, often leading to less rigorous checks. Coke produced in Bolivia, Peru, and Colombia is simply exported to Ecuador, from where it is then exported to the ports of Antwerp, Rotterdam, and sometimes Hamburg. Dritan would go on to smuggle hundreds of kilos of coke into Europe with this method. Though in June 2014, Dritan was arrested yet again. You might be thinking, really? Again? This guy isn't a good criminal at all. Well, stick with me, because being incarcerated in Ecuador may have actually been a blessing for him. This time, he was arrested in Quito, the capital of Ecuador. Ecuadorian police busted a shipment of 278 kilos of coke and held Dritan and 11 others responsible for the shipment. He was sentenced to 13 years in prison. However, this sentence did not withhold him from going on about his business. Actually, quite the opposite. Ecuadorian prisons are often blamed for their lack of control. Dritan was able to freely communicate in jail with his partners and associates around the world, even video calling them from the comfort of his cell. This allowed him to grow his business immensely from within the prison walls. But that wasn't without the help of someone notorious. It is speculated that Dritan met a man called Cesar Emilio Montenegro Castillo, also known as Don Monty, inside this prison. Don Monty was incarcerated in the same jail as Dritan since 2011, but he was able to continue his business as well. he was directly linked to El Chapo's Sinaloa cartel in Mexico and the Colombian cartel Norte del Valle, two of the world's biggest cartels. By becoming a business partner of him, Dritan suddenly found himself amidst the upper echelon of the coke trade. He now could negotiate with the cartels themselves and utilize the most efficient smuggling methods and routes. Eventually, Dritan had such a good standing with Don Monte that for every shipment he bought, the cartels added the same amount of coke initially for free. Dritan only had to pay back once he had sold every last kilo, according to Italian investigators, allowing him to earn twice as much per shipment without having to pay the purchase costs twice. The fact that a notorious criminal such as Dritan could play a leading role in coordinating such a massive cocaine trafficking operation from his prison cell in Ecuador shows not only his strength, but also the weakness of the criminal justice system in Ecuador.
He would go on to become the head of the so-called Kompania Bello syndicate. He is the undisputed capo of Kompania Bello, a union of criminal operators with access to unlimited quantities of coke, it was said.
Kompania Bello is a syndicate made up of 14 Albanian crime organizations involved in large-scale drug smuggling through the ports of Antwerp and Rotterdam. Kompania Bello was active in Albania, Belgium, Ecuador, Italy, and the Netherlands, and conducted their business in an unconventional way with a sophisticated business model. Usually, international importers of cocaine work separately from the wholesalers and the gangs distributing the drugs on the street. In this case, the Albanian organizations ditched that entire model and controlled the whole chain.
They essentially cut out every middleman, leaving more profit for the syndicate itself.
Each organization that was part of the syndicate had a speciality and brought something to the table. Take the two men called Gimi and Reti, for example. Gimi was the head of an organization that also had direct links to drug cartels in South America, helping Dritan source as much coke as possible. Reti, who was based in the Netherlands, was in turn the head of a criminal group described as the link between Dritan and lower-level Albanian crime gangs involved in drug distribution in Europe. Other players of the syndicate were the brothers Gerti and Edmond Marcu. They distributed coke that arrived in the Netherlands to Italy, Germany, and other European states via trucks. A man called Denis Matoshi was also involved in moving large quantities of coke from the Dutch ports to the rest of Europe. The men exchanged drug couriers, drivers, information on police investigations and court cases, as well as ideas for future activities with each other.
Where criminal organizations are commonly enemies of each other because they battle for power, all members of Kompania Bello understood that operating together would earn them more money than if they would be acting on their own.
The results were there to show for it. In the course of several years, it is estimated that the syndicate smuggled nearly 10,000 kilos of coke marked with their Bello logo throughout Europe, netting them hundreds of millions in profit. For example, brothers Gerti and Edmund allegedly distributed at least 50 kilos of coke per week, resulting in an estimated annual turnover of 70.2 million euros. So, what else made the organization so powerful besides their collaboration with each other? Multiple things. One of them was their extensive network of corrupt government officials, custom officers, police officers, dock workers, and so on. The vast profits made from the drug trade allowed them to increase their budgets they spent on bribery, making those people of interest succumb to the temptation even faster. 100,000 euros for a government official to look away every now and then? Why not? A customs officer could be offered 30,000 euros to close their eyes when they're scanning a container full of coke, acting as if it's not there. Sure, police officers that could earn 20,000 euros to let go a suspect that had just been caught red-handed with kilos of coke. No problem. A dock worker that would be offered 50,000 euros to put a container in a certain spot in the port, which is just a 5-minute job, but earns more than their year's salary. Also, not an issue. In fact, they'd rather pay off as many people as necessary for a smooth and hassle-free transport of their coke. At some point, bribery was even marked in the cost of sales. All these costs would be recuperated with the profit of just a few kilos, and all these corrupt contacts were happily shared among the different organizations of the syndicate. Well, you know what they say, sharing is caring. Meanwhile, it's a problem that becomes more and more common. Most of the European countries are not seen as corrupt. However, with the increasing amounts of money offered, it's becoming more prevalent in the countries where it's least expected. At the end of the day, everybody has a price. Saying no to more than a year's salary for a 5-minute job will have plenty of people thinking twice. Another factor that made them strong was their loyalty towards each other. Loyalty was truly paramount. Your word means a lot in Balkan countries. Their hierarchy was clear for everyone. Every organization knew its role within the syndicate, and every associate knew what not to do. Who decided to betray, disobey any rules, or talk knew their family members would be in serious danger, no matter where they would reside. At the end of the day, Albanians did not joke around. Another factor that made them really strong was their abundant and well-organized cash flow. Making money in the underworld is one thing, but being able to move, launder, and spend it is something entirely different. The Kompania Bello laundered their proceeds using an underground alternative remittance system of Chinese origin known as the Fei Qian system. Much like the Hawala transfer system, people used the Fei Qian to deposit a sum in a network agency in one country. Another operator withdraws the equivalent amount elsewhere in the world and passes it on to the intended recipient, leaving not a trace of telltale evidence for law enforcement investigators. The network is believed to have laundered millions of euros through this system. It must be said that Dritan did not solely rely on this Chinese system. The Chinese take large percentages for their services. Thus, Dritan sought other ways. He started cutting them out by using his own money mules who would distribute cash all over the world, often hidden in cars and trucks. Just like the drug smuggling, cutting out the middleman would increase his own profits. Dritan was all about maximizing profits. In January 2017, he had scheduled another shipment with Don Monti and one of his associates called Antrax. 371 kilos of coke was stuffed in the floors of multiple containers. The floors of each container was opened, stuffed with packets of cocaine and insulated with foam. The floor was then welded back into place. The coke would then be extracted after the legal goods sitting on top of the coke arrived at their destination. Italian police were tipped off and managed to intercept parts of the communication between Dritan and Antrax. They also informed Ecuadorian police, but the shipment was already on its way by then. Everything went well. They saw nothing, and it has already sailed. Antrax sent to Dritan. Dritan replied, "Look, friend, if we get along well with those people, you won't know where to stash the cash, believe me." The shipment was destined for an important group of Albanian traffickers. It was important everything went well. 371 kilos, $4,400 per kilo, with a total cost of $1.63 million. $1.2 million is already prepaid. Antrax messaged to Dritan. Once here, they will be sold for 22,000 to 24,000 euros, netting roughly 7 million, Dritan messaged back. The reason these messages were intercepted is because while the syndicate was prospering, their success did not go unnoticed. In 2015, an investigation into Kompania Bello was started, initiated and led by Italian prosecutors. They were joined by the Netherlands and assisted by several other countries, the biggest of its kind ever against Albanian-speaking organized crime, Interpol said at the start of the investigation. They only had one aim, to bring down the entire syndicate. But were they able to do this? Over the course of 5 years, they arrested 84 people who were part of the Kompania Bello. Even though it was unfortunate for the syndicate to lose so many men, it is part of the business. It only put a small little dent in the organization, and they continued running without a problem. These men were arrested all over the world: Italy, Ecuador, the Netherlands, the United Kingdom, Switzerland, and Germany. In addition, 4 tons of coke and 5.5 million euros in cash were seized along the way. Then, in the early hours of the 15th of September 2020, hundreds of police officers, including special intervention teams with the support of Interpol and Eurojust, carried out coordinated raids against members of Kompania Bello. It led to 20 arrests, mainly throughout Europe. This time, they managed to arrest the more significant players of the syndicate, one of them being Denis Matoshi.
5 people were arrested in Italy,
5 in Albania, 2 in the Netherlands, 2 in Germany, 2 in Greece, 1 in Romania, 1 in Hungary, 1 in Spain, and 1 in Dubai. After serving 7 years in the Ecuadorian jail, Dritan was allowed early parole by a judge in 2021 due to his very good behavior, a court document showed. He settled in a wealthy neighborhood in Guayaquil in a private complex. Judge Diego Poma ordered that he was not allowed to leave Ecuador, had to wear an ankle monitor, wasn't allowed to commit any crimes, had to report himself in person at a police station every 15 days, and he had to stay in the country until 2027. This was a highly questionable decision, as Albania and Italy requested extradition of Dritan. Additionally, looking at his past, escaping prisons multiple times, it was only a matter of time before Dritan would disappear again. And so, he did. He cut off his ankle monitor and vanished once again. The business did not stop running for even a day. For the question whether he was a good criminal, Dritan Rexhepi curriculum vitae undoubtedly shows his criminal drive, involvement and capacity to manage a major trafficking operation worldwide despite his status as an inmate or wanted man, Italian prosecutors said after his latest escape. Then, 2 years after his last escape in Ecuador, on the 10th of November 2023, news broke that no one really expected. Dritan got arrested yet again, this time in Turkey. He entered the country using a fake Colombian passport, registered in the name of Benjamin Omar Perez Garcia. The press release was accompanied by a video that showed Turkish special forces ram through a front door, after which you can see Dritan being held on the ground by several officers. He lived in an enormous villa. The house was thoroughly searched, and footage shows weapons being found, as well as large sums of cash and luxury goods such as watches and other jewelry. Dritan was immediately brought to a cell, and on the same evening, Interpol Tirana and other justice institutions in Albania started the procedures for the extradition of Dritan. Will he be able to escape again? That's the question. What kind of jail sentence he is also potentially looking at also remains unknown. Besides all the drug smuggling, Dritan is a suspect in the disappearance of Jan Prenga as well. After he was kidnapped on the 20th of January 2020, he was never seen again. Allegedly, Jan's brother Astri had stolen nearly 300 kilos of coke from Dritan in England. At this point in his story, we can only ask what his life would have looked like had he not been able to escape his cell in Durrës in Albania back in 2006. What would have happened had he been charged with 2 hits he was suspected of? His life may have taken a different turn. For now, there has been no new news after his arrest, indicating whether he has been extradited already or not. It's likely that this will be done under full secrecy, and the word will only go out once the extradition is all said and done, and Dritan is behind bars in Albania. If you have enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, a comment sharing your thoughts, feedback or ideas, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. I'm well underway towards that 100,000 subscriber mark. See you in the next one.